All right, today we are breaking down one of the absolute cornerstones of your ATPL exams, flight planning. We're going to tackle the three big pillars you have to master: routes, fuel, and weight. Let's jump right in. You guessed it, the flight plan. Getting this wrong can mean anything from losing easy marks on an exam to, well, much more serious problems in the real world. So in this explainer, we're going to build one from the ground up so you can really get a handle on the theory. So here's our flight path for today. First, we'll cover the why, the whole point behind flight planning. Then we'll build our plan piece by piece, hitting routes, then fuel, then weight. And finally, we'll see how it all comes together in that one critical document.
Okay, so before we start crunching numbers, let's talk about the big picture. What is the fundamental mission of any flight plan? Why do we spend so much time on this?
This document right here, this is what it's all about. The Operational Flight Plan, or OFP. You got to think of this as the master blueprint for the entire flight. Every single calculation, every decision, every contingency plan, it's all captured right here. It's the one document that the dispatchers, the flight crew, and air traffic control all rely on. Every OFP is basically a balancing act between these three pillars. First, safety. That is the absolute #1 non-negotiable foundation. Then, legality. This means making sure every detail, especially your fuel reserves, follows aviation law to the letter. And finally, efficiency. This is about finding the best route to save fuel, time, and of course, money. If you mess up any one of these, the whole plan is a failure. For example, trying to save a little fuel by routing through a known thunderstorm, well, that's sacrificing safety for efficiency, and that's a catastrophic failure in planning. All right, let's get our hands dirty and start building this plan. First up, the route. And this is so much more than just drawing a straight line between two airports. It's about navigating a really complex three-dimensional highway system up in the sky. Now pay close attention to this one, because this is a classic mistake that trips up so many students on exams. Mixing up track and heading. See, your track is the actual path you want to follow over the ground, but your heading, that's where you actually have to point the nose of the aircraft to counteract the wind and stay on that track. Forgetting to correct for wind is an easy way to lose marks. You know how highways on the ground have lanes? Well, it's the same in the sky. These are called airways, and a standard airway is 10 nautical miles on either side of the center line. So a 20-mile-wide corridor. That's a key number you're going to want to remember. But watch this. When we get closer to the airport for our departure or arrival, what we call SIDS and stars, that corridor shrinks by half. It goes down to just plus or minus 5 nautical miles. Suddenly, your margin for error is way, way smaller. So why the change? Well, it's pretty simple, right? The closer you get to an airport, the more crowded the sky becomes. This much tighter tolerance is all about keeping you safely separated from other planes and making sure you have clearance from any obstacles on the ground. Down here, precision is everything. Okay, so we have our route. Now it's time to talk about fuel. And let me tell you, this is way more complicated than just filling up the tanks. Every single kilogram of fuel on board has to be justified and legally accounted for. The best way to think about the fuel calculation is like a logical buildup. You start with the basics and add layers of safety. First up, you've got your trip fuel. That's what you need to get from A to B. Then you add contingency fuel, just in case of unexpected headwinds or delays. After that comes alternate fuel, in case you can't land at your destination and have to divert. On top of all that, you add your final reserve, which is absolutely non-negotiable. And last, you account for taxi fuel to get from the gate to the runway. Add it all up, and what do you get? Block fuel. That's the grand total in your tanks right before you start the engines. So listen, you absolutely have to know these definitions cold for your exams. They will come up over and over again. Just remember, block fuel is the total you start with. Trip fuel is for the journey itself. And reserve fuel is that legally required safety buffer. Got it? Good. Now, here's a bit of a pro-level tip for you, and it's something that just loves to pop up on ATPL exams. It's called the reclearance procedure. It's a really clever strategy that airlines use on long-haul flights to legally carry less fuel at takeoff. And this slide explains it perfectly. With a standard plan, you have to lug enough fuel for the entire journey, plus all your reserves, right from the start. But with a reclearance plan, you plan to a decision point somewhere mid-flight. You only carry enough fuel to get to that point and then divert to a nearby alternate. If you get to the decision point and everything looks great, the weather's good, you have enough fuel, you get a new clearance to continue to your original destination.
It's an awesome way to reduce takeoff weight, which means you burn less fuel overall. And that whole idea of saving weight brings us perfectly to our third and final piece of the puzzle, the weight factor. You see, every single decision we've made so far about our route and our fuel has a direct impact on the aircraft's mass, and that mass controls everything about its performance. I mean, this quote really says it all. It's simple physics. A heavier aircraft needs more lift. More lift creates more drag, and more drag means you burn more fuel. Not only that, but it'll affect your cruising altitude, how long it takes to take off. Mass is truly everything in flight planning. And that is why every single kilogram is meticulously accounted for. We're talking everything from the passengers and their bags to the catering arts in the galley and, of course, the fuel itself. It all adds up, and it all directly impacts the physics of the flight you're about to command. Okay, so we've planned our route, we've calculated our fuel, and we've accounted for our weight. Now, let's bring it all home and see how these three pillars come together to create that final operational flight plan. This is the moment it all becomes real. The OFP takes all our theory, the route planning, the fuel numbers, the weight calculations, and it transforms them from just numbers on a page into a single, actionable plan for the flight crew. And if you look at a real OFP, you'll see every single thing we just talked about. The route section lists all your waypoints and tracks. The fuel section breaks down that entire buildup we discussed. The weight section has critical numbers like your zero fuel weight, that's ZFW, and your takeoff weight, or TOW. And the performance section gives you your planned altitudes, speeds, and estimated times. It is the complete mission, all on paper. So, to wrap it all up, what are the key takeaways here? First, great flight planning is always a balance between safety, legality, and efficiency. Second, you have to master that logical buildup. It always flows from route to fuel to weight. And finally, all this work culminates in the OFP, your final unified plan of action. And I'll leave you with a final thought, a little scenario to apply what you've learned. Imagine you're in the captain's seat, approaching that reclearance decision point, but you've hit stronger than expected headwinds, which means you've burned more fuel than you planned. What's the call? Do you push onto your destination, or do you play it safe and divert? The right answer is buried in the numbers you planned before you ever left the ground. Hey, if you found this breakdown useful for your ATPL studies and you want more practical exam tips just like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.